There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, ahoy and welcome to another edition of the United States' favorite pirate party podcast. And truthfully, probably the second best podcast our guest has been on this week. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Talk the Plank. It is your host. I'm your host, Jolly Mitch, captain of the United States Pirate Party and friend of the show. Joining me today is Wisconsin Secretary of State candidate for the Green Party, Pete Karras. Pete, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to give you the floor and allow you to introduce yourself. But otherwise, I just want to say, folks, it's a good one today.
Okay. Thanks, Mitch. And thanks to the United States Pirate Party for inviting me to talk the plank. So I am the candidate for a third-party candidate running under the Green Party ballot line for Secretary of State in Wisconsin. And you're going to say, wow, Secretary of State, that's really cool, all the things you can do. But in effect, that might be a little off. The Wisconsin Secretary of State position over the last 5 or 6 decades has had most of its duties stripped from it. So we do things like we are the holder of the Great Seal of the state of Wisconsin, and we get to use it too. So when a bill comes in, we get to, I'm not sure how it works, but I assume you just, do one of these. So that, that's really cool. We have a couple other duties, but in general, it's an administrative office with hardly any policy-making abilities. So I thought this was the perfect party to run on as a third-party candidate. So a little history on myself. I've never voted for a Republican or a Democrat for president. I'm 67 years old, and I just saw it. I saw it really early. I saw the way these two parties work together, the way they talk about passing issues and passing bills, and sometimes the bills have great sounding names, but either the devil's in the detail on these bills, or it just happens to fail by one vote, and it never quite gets done. They don't want to settle a lot of issues because they want to keep us fighting over it. They're good talking points for them. Just look at the Roe v. Wade thing. The Democrats could have codified that back in the Obama years. They chose not to do that. And now they're complaining that the Supreme Court overturned it. I could give example after example of that. We are trying to put together a unity campaign because since the office does not have a whole lot of issues to talk about, the one big thing we can talk about and our main issue is breaking this stranglehold of the Republicans and Democrats, break the duopoly, and give third-party candidates a chance to not only get on the ballot, but have people feel that they are viable in winning. And I think we've structured our campaign where we're going to do really well. A lot of times candidates will come in third party and nobody hears of them, and they'll get their 2-3%. We put together a very good campaign structure. We're fairly well funded for a third party candidate. To date, we've raised about $45,000. We're looking to raise more, and I should probably say PeteKarras.com is the place to do that, because if I don't do that, my campaign manager will yell at me later. But we've also checked into demographics and voting trends, and we know where we can get the votes. I think we're going to do really well. We're going to end up somewhere between, if we execute properly, we'll end up with about 20% of the vote. If we really execute properly and get funded properly, with small donations, of course, no corporate PACs, no money from billionaires, because we have billionaires lining up, and we just have to turn away. Sorry, Mr. Billionaire, you have to go away. But we think we actually can win this. It's such a low profile race. If we get our message out, we think it'll work. And our message really resonates with not only the people of Wisconsin, but the people of the country, that the two-party system is just not serving them. So we're here today. We're asking for the Pirate Party endorsement. We've also asked several other parties for endorsements, and it looks like we'll be successful. And we're going to try running on a unity campaign, a campaign for all third parties. And when you look at it, 90% of the third parties agree on 90% of the issues anyway. And the one thing we all agree on is we want our voice heard and the voters be able to hear our voices so they can vote for us and support us. You know what? I could go on. My prepared speech talked about my experiences in preschool when I was 4 years old. But I think it might be better if Mitch, maybe we start a discussion.
No, absolutely. And just to your point, I think third party unity is a very important issue. I say all the time that the duopoly is so entrenched that we call ourselves third parties, when in reality, we are minor parties. We are political parties. We are still fighting for the same thing. We are looking for elected office. The difference being is that the old powers, the people who have held power since, the 1860s, have rigged election laws to make sure it's going to be just them for as long as it can be indefinitely. So in order to have someone say, hey, I will go by your stupid rules and show that we can still win, and show people that a third party is not a waste of a vote, that's an important thing. That is a very important issue to take up. And to your point on third party unity, 100%. I think the one thing that we all agree on, as we were saying, is that the system's broken. The duopoly doesn't serve us. I believe the famous quote is the United States is a one-party state, but with typical Americans, they have two of them, which is unfortunately damningly true. But it doesn't need to be. In the history of the United States, even with the structure that we have had times in our lifetime where there have been Congresses full of multiple parties and Senates full of multiple parties. So we've shown that it's difficult and it hasn't been recent. And if anyone looks at the presidential election and assumes that that is the marker of success of a political party, that's where you're wrong. There have been people who have made substantial change without ever winning an election. Fannie Lou Hamer comes to mind. But I think when you're looking at people who are willing to put themselves out there to public scrutiny and run as a third party candidate and give people that opportunity, I always say, if not you, then who? So Pete, thank you for being you to run for the office. And to your point, Wisconsin Secretary of State, as you said, it's been whittled down to not do much, to be the holder of the seal of Wisconsin. But it's not a nothing job. There is some responsibilities, and it looked like you were planning on doing some cool things with those responsibilities, should you be elected to it. Which again, I think is one of the cases for the Greens. I think this is one of those opportunities where, hey, maybe a Green should be holding this office.
Yeah, there are. I guess I did minimize the duties just a little. There are some real issues with the records that we keep. I mean, it goes back to 1848, and if I'm right, I think that was before Al Gore invented the internet. So much of that information was not digitized. So that's a process that we'd like to continue and make it as accessible to people as possible. And as Secretary of State, I would be the chair of the Commissioner Board of Public Lands. And basically what that committee does, it's a committee would be myself, the Attorney General, and the State Treasurer. And it's a constitutional office, commission. And over the years, Wisconsin has sold off a lot of forest lands. And we've saved that money. We've loaned that money to municipalities to do things like road projects or whatever capital expenditures they have, charge them a lower interest rate, around 5%, and then take that money and fund public schools with that, and specifically libraries, books for libraries, computers, that sort of thing. Fairly non-controversial. Right now, $69 or $70 per student that receives those funds, and it's statewide. I'd like to change it where we do a little bit more based on the need of the community. I mean, I live in Muskego, Wisconsin, and our high school is a Taj Mahal. We're suburban Milwaukee. I mean, the thing is just beautiful. You know, oh, we're starting a lacrosse team. We should probably, you know, put a lacrosse court up, that sort of thing. I grew up and spent most of my life in Racine, Wisconsin, where for lunch we had lead paint chips. So I would like to change that so that we do a little more based on need, because some communities are funded better than other communities. Really, the suburbs get a lot of the money. The suburbs and the experts, and left out in the street are the people in rural Wisconsin or in the larger cities. So I'd like to balance that. And, you know, Mitch, to your point too about third parties, Wisconsin has a proud history of third parties. We were the Progressive Party. We were fighting Bob LaFollette, was a congressman, a governor, and congressman and a senator. And then his brother was governor, and that lasted from, you know what's really cool? Go to Wikipedia and look at the 1924 presidential election, and you'll see red and you'll see blue, and you see the state of Wisconsin being green. And, you know, because of that, and because of the leadership we had from third parties and the pressure that third parties put on the Republicans and the Democrats, Wisconsin started things, you know, that other states had never heard of. The 8-hour work week, workers' compensation. I mean, you can go right down the list. In addition to that, parallel to that, from the early 1900s through the 1950s or so, we had socialist mayors. They were called the sewer socialists, and mayors of Milwaukee. So they were a dominant political party, and the reason they succeeded is, you know, they took a lot of crap from the East Coast socialists, because the East Coast socialists were all talking about principle and, you know, never really got a whole lot done. They're called the sewer socialists because Milwaukee was one of the first major cities to have sewers. The park system is amazing. There was so much investment in infrastructure, and they did things. There wasn't a whole lot of politics. They weren't fighting like the Democrats and Republicans do. They just got done what they had to do. And so we had sewer socialist mayors forever. So third parties can really, really have an impact. We just have had the doors closed on us.
You know, I think I remember a documentary I was watching on the sewer socialists, and someone mentioned of the East Coast socialists that they couldn't be elected dog catcher. So, you know, it just goes to show the power of grassroots movements, and this shows that third parties can be successful. Mm-hmm. And to your point, Pete, what happened to the third party movement in Wisconsin? But the duopoly, these Republicans and Democrats that supposedly can't work with each other, compromise, they're able to shake hands and say, let's get rid of these guys. And it's just, that's a sad reality, is if you want bipartisanship in this country, challenge the duopoly, and those guys will work together to prevent that from happening. It's a terrible reality.
Oh, it is. It's horrible. I mean, what happened in Milwaukee with the sewer socialists is one of the Democrats ran basically as a sewer socialist, but as a Democrat. And then the Democrats got in there. Mayor Meyer was his name. And he was a great mayor because he was a sewer socialist. He kept taking on the tradition. But, you know, all of a sudden it made the Democratic Party look better to the people of Milwaukee. And, you know, and in Wisconsin and other states too, they put up structural barriers. I mean, we're pretty lucky in that my race, a statewide race in Wisconsin, you only need 2,000 valid signatures. So we can collect 4,000. Illinois for a minor party is at 25, 30,000. I mean, it's just totally ridiculous number. And then even if you do get all those done and you try to get on the ballot, there's Democrats, generally in Wisconsin, I know Republicans in other states, try to kick you off the ballot afterwards. I mean, we just went through that in 2024 with Jill Stein, the Green Party presidential candidate. And, that's interesting because the Green Party was given 26 hours notice to respond to the Supreme Court. So we were scrambling and, we made a zillion phone calls. Finally, we found a lawyer who'd handle it. We made our case. It was a very, very technical, probably unconstitutional piece of legislation that they were trying to get Jill thrown off the ballot for. And it looked like we were probably going to get thrown on the ballot. Then we said, hey, if you throw us off the ballot, you also have to, under this law, you also have to deny ballot access to the Libertarians and the Constitution Party. Well, all of a sudden, the Democrats said, wow, we thought this was going to be a net positive, having the Greens gone. But if we have the, Libertarians and the Constitution Party, this might be a net negative for us. And all of a sudden, things changed, and we stayed on the ballot. It's all sorts of ballot in California right now. Also, the Green Party candidate for governor. He submitted all his paperwork. I think it was a week, 10 days ago, on the final day, as you're supposed to do it. At 10 minutes to 5, the filing deadline, he gets an email saying, oh, there's some things wrong here. You need to get in, you need to correct these. 10 minutes. They gave him 10 minutes to correct it. The problem they found was in California, you have to submit either the last 3 or 4 years of tax returns. And I don't know how he made this mistake, but he did not redact one of the phone numbers on his old tax returns. So the Democratic Secretary of State throws him off the ballot, goes to a judge who is a democratically elected judge and says, takes about 20 minutes and say, can't do anything. It's in federal court right now. I mean, this is just the ridiculousness of it. Third parties made a pretty nice dent in New Jersey in 2024. So the legislature turns around and triples the number of ballots that are required, or signatures that are required. So it just goes on and on.
Which folks, if you see a minor party, a third party, an independent candidate on the ballot, understand the hoops that they had to jump through to get there. And if that's not your reason enough to earn your vote, then please do your due diligence in the voting booth and look them up. See if you agree with their policies, because, hey, man, they worked hard to get on the ballot. They must believe in something, which is an important thing. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure the minor or the major parties believe in anything nowadays other than power and corporate money. And that is the one thing they fight to uphold. I believe Biden famously said he promises that nothing will fundamentally change. And that was the one promise he kept all administration. We get to the point where in the United States, I think the main issue that if we are going to run a unity campaign as minor parties, as third parties, as independents, we have to raise issue to the average citizen where they show it's something like 70 to 80% of US citizens want a third party, which just translates to they want something else than the duopoly. We have to make it known to them, you know why you don't have something else? Because they are making laws preventing it from being someone other than them. And we have to say, hey, enough is enough. Let's make, if this is truly a democratic process, let's make the signature requirements equal across the board. And let's start there. And if they refuse to do that, then you know what their intentions are when it comes to this elective process, their opinion on democracy. And again, you know what? At least the Republican Party has the gall to say things like, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. So you know where they stand. The Democratic Party at least flaunts itself as the defenders of democracy, and look at what they do when people other than them or to the left of them are trying to win ballot access.
It's nuts. And, I ran the campaign. I've run some statewide and congressional and local campaigns over the years. And just ran one for Chester Todd, who was 80, at the time's 84 years old, first district in Wisconsin, Paul Ryan's old district. And we ran that campaign. And, Chester used to say, Chester, an elder in the Black community. So he always said, Democrats just come in and lie to us. And at least the Republicans look us in the eye and say, we're not going to do anything for you. So that was kind of a interesting observation.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think that goes back to the Malcolm X quote, where Malcolm said the Republicans are like wolves and the liberals are like foxes. They're both hunting, but the wolf is a little more direct about it. The fox will pretend to be your friend, will pretend to be your ally. And when you think back that this was being said about the Democrats and Republicans in the 60s, 60 years later, what has changed? Have they only gotten more emboldened? Have they only gotten worse? The answer, I think, is yes, personally.
It has. I mean, even Eisenhower's farewell speech, blasted the military-industrial complex, and and people were warning of it. Henry Wallace was warning of it in the 1940s, after the Democratic Party booted him out of being vice president in Roosevelt's last election. And think of the impact of that. Think of the impact of what they did at the convention to Henry Wallace. Instead, they picked Harry Truman. So if we would have had Henry Wallace, who was really, what was his speech? The common man speech. And he was saying we have to do things for the people. That would have changed everything. The difference post World War II would have been ridiculous. Maybe we could have stayed out of this ridiculous Cold War for a long time. We could have well, I'm dreaming. That didn't happen. But the Democratic Party at the convention, Henry Wallace had the votes, and they adjourned, and then went to smoke-filled rooms and came back and picked somebody else.
Which again, they knew Roosevelt was in poor health, and they knew the vice president was essentially going to be the next president. And they knew Wallace was progressive. And unfortunately, it's almost as if they're looking at what happened to the Republicans with Teddy Roosevelt, and they said, we can't let that happen to us. Which, again, the farce of the democratic process from the Democratic Party. It's incredible how some people being liberals, when you criticize the Democrats, they say, oh, you must be a Republican. And it absolves them of the fact that, well, how can you criticize us when, you want the Republicans to win? That's just as much scare tactics as when the Republicans blame immigrants or Muslims for the problems of the United States. I need people to recognize the fear tactics that the Democratic Party is using is just as much fear tactics as the fear tactics that the Republican Party uses. They're trying to get you afraid into voting for them. They have employed a Pied Piper method over the last 10 years at least, where they will put attack ads out on the most extreme candidates. So that's the people that people get their eyes on. Oh, in Illinois, it was, oh my God, what's his name? Because he just won it again. Darren Bailey. Darren Bailey was probably not the front runner in 2022. It was likely the mayor of the second largest city in Illinois, who is a moderate Black Republican. And they thought, let's not, I don't like this. Let's get the guy from Southern Illinois who's saying we should kick Chicago out of Illinois. And then what happened? JB pulls in over 50% of the vote. And they did it again. They somehow pulled off the trick again because he's the Republican candidate once again. I know the American people are tired of being lied to. And, there's not a single person who's going to look you in the eyes and say, well, I trust Congress. I trust the government. I trust the two-party system. Everyone's willing to admit that the party has failed or that this system has failed, but no one is willing to take a step back and say, well, my vote matters, and if I put my vote somewhere else, it'll mean something. Everyone's afraid of letting the other guy win. But I say this to any conservative and any liberal who may be watching. I invite you both. If you're a Wisconsin conservative and you are a Wisconsin liberal, I want you both to come together and vote for Pete Kairos, because that is taking a vote from both major parties and giving it to someone who deserves it. Uh, and just to be clear, folks, that's not the endorsement quite yet. In fact, let me just plug in. Pete will be back to join us for our return Pirate National Committee meeting on April 19th. We have the next two meetings off. So there's no meeting tomorrow and there's no meeting next Sunday, for the sake of those who are celebrating Easters. So thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you to the commenter. Someone just commented, Mitch. Hello, Rowan. Nice to see you. He said Pete is awesome. So Pete, you have support in the pirate community already. But again, Pete will be joining us to officially get the endorsement. This is kind of cutting the middleman so he doesn't have to make the spiel twice. Again, we want to give you the floor and let not only our people get to know you, but anyone who's curious. I want all angles to be able to get to know you and get to learn about you. As such, I'm also going to make sure in the description or in the comment box, I'm going to make sure to include the virtual enlightenment salon that you were recently on with the U.S. Transhumanist Party. I'll make sure to get that in briefly. But to the point of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, that is something that we've done in terms of third-party unity. Is we have joined up with the U.S. Transhumanists to become the All Hands for a Free Future coalition. And I do foresee many minor parties trying to gather up together support to try to work together and break the duopoly, which is a big part of your campaign, is trying to form this unity. So let me ask, because people are going to wonder, what is the end goal of the breaking of the duopoly? Do you think that it is simply to have more options, or do you think that we need to finally put an end to the reign of terror of the Democrats and Republicans once and for all?
So in my perfect world, and I like to have a perfect world because it makes me feel good. I win this election. All of a sudden, the people of Wisconsin say, wow, we have a Green Party guy, we have a third party guy as the Secretary of State. And then all these other third party candidates rise up, and the Republicans and Democrats feel so much pressure because they can lose elections. Now they just worry about, is somebody to the left of me or right of me or somebody better known going to primary me. Now they're talking about losing a seat in the, a seat at the table. And so I see them being pressured into passing ranked choice voting or approval voting or something of that form so that people can feel even safer voting for third party candidates. And then, that passes and it evolves. And pretty soon we're completely done with this, this current system, and the state of Wisconsin starts a parliamentary proportional representation. And, you get, however the rules are written, you get 10% of the vote, you get 10% of the seats in the Wisconsin parliament. And so I guess that's my dream. And then, we all hug and go walking away down a nice brick road, and we're all really happy, and everybody lives happily ever after.
See, your perfect world sounds nice. Why can't we dream of a perfect world?
Exactly.
So you know what? I think Wisconsin Parliament sounds like a fine reality. I would love to see a U.S. state. Maybe Wisconsin is the first state to do proportional representation. As far as I can remember, the U.S. Constitution says the states are supposed to have a Republican form of government.
Yes.
That's it. That's all it mandates. I know Nebraska's close. They've got I believe it's unicameral parliament or whatever their system is. They only have the one house. So they're doing something a little different. Why can't we do something a little different? Uh, we could absolutely. But yeah, that rocks. And folks, if again, I have to drive this point home. If you see a third party candidate, if you see an independent on the ballot, that is so much more substantially important than seeing that, presidential candidate. Now, mind you, the presidential candidate's important. And to your point earlier, I believe Illinois did keep Jill Stein off the ballot, but whatever rules they applied to Jill Stein, they somehow avoided and were able to keep Robert Kennedy on the ballot, which of course would just take votes away from Trump. So again, the foxes of the Democratic Party strike again.
Mm-hmm.
But as much as nice as it is to see a presidential candidate on the ballot, especially looking back in 2016 when the Greens got 1 million votes, Libertarians got a couple million votes. It was like people were not satisfied with who were the options. It was either the status quo or something terribly different than what the status quo was. People are fed up with it, and you know, to the Democrats watching, you saying, "Don't you guys remember Obama? Let's go back to the Obama years." That makes you conservatives. You guys have become the conservative party. The only people who are striving for anything different are the Republicans, and their different is frankly very frightening to me. I don't want Christian nationalism in this country. I don't want whatever their idea of American patriotism is. I don't want ICE in the streets murdering American citizens. I don't want ICE in the streets murdering anybody. I don't want ICE in the streets. But when we look at the major parties, it might be the Republicans deploying ICE right now, but Biden raised ICE's budget every year of his 4-year term. So when we say that the left wing and the right wing are two wings of the same bird, this is what we're talking about. Uh, I think it's time we put this bird out to roost and we have something different. I think we need choices, and to have someone like Pete, you, to have anyone want to provide those choices is an important thing that we need. uh, just on the basis that people are willing to give up and say it's impossible. For you to say, no, it's not. In fact, I'm going to show you it's not impossible. That is incredibly important. In fact, you've already shown it's not impossible because you were a Racine city councilman as a Green.
I was 3 terms. So
Uh,
it was a great experience.
yes.
I had, of course, I brought up some ideas that other folks had never heard of before. Things like back then we called it instant runoff voting when the council to operate that way. And they just, I got these blank stares, and then I get this nickname, Alderman Moonbeam, which I took as a compliment. As being named, Jerry Brown, of course, was Governor Moonbeam. But it's interesting, there's the Overton window and I was outside of that very often. And now you look now, and ranked choice voting is in the Overton window, along with a lot of other things that were talked about years ago. And, you give they sound like these wacky ideas. And all of a sudden, 20 years later, they're in the mainstream. I mean, and sometimes they go out of the mainstream. Richard Nixon did wage and price controls. I mean,
Right.
planned government. I mean, think about that. Wow, what would the Republicans think of that now?
Right. Richard Nixon founded the EPA.
Yeah.
Unfathomable in
Clean Water Act,
2026.
Clean Air Act.
My God, it's how things change. And again, the more things change, the more things stay the same. It's they were keeping us out then. You know, they do not want people other than the chosen class of the Democrats and the Republicans in power. And when they shift, there's nothing we can do about it. Except there is something we can do about it. You could run for something. And, you know, to run for Wisconsin's Secretary of State, again, a reachable achievement. You know, people may feel nervous about a green governor, and you shouldn't feel nervous about a green governor. What's wrong with you? Why are you feeling nervous about a green governor? Uh, but when you describe the Secretary of State for Wisconsin, you describe it as low stake, and it is for the most part a very low stake. It's very positional, but the roles that you have, you know, I think you're more than qualified to hold those roles, and to be able to say, well, with what power I do have, I will execute that power wisely. This is what I will do with my little power that I have. People can trust that. You know, you can't trust someone who wields as much power as a president or a governor and say, I'm going to keep every campaign promise. But when you have a position that says, well, I can only do so much, but I can do this with this power, that's important. That's very important.
You know, being Secretary of State gives you a podium. I mean, you can, and I'm going to use that podium to continue to fight for reforms and to continue to fight for other third parties and access to the ballot and making people feel free to feel like it's okay and safe to vote for a third party candidate. And just a very good showing by my campaign or winning the office will say a lot. I mean, because we've had, like I said, Wisconsin has a pretty strong progressive tradition and well, third party tradition. We also had, you know, Ed Thompson was 20 years ago, maybe, received 11%. He ran as a libertarian, received 11% of the vote for governor. I mean, so it's possible, and it's, you know, let's just get this done. Let's just, you know, nothing bothers me more than somebody this whole lesser of two evils, or as Ralph Nader would say, the least worst argument. Can't you vote for somebody that you believe in? I mean, look at what they've done to us. Look at what they did to us in Afghanistan. It took 4 presidents, Democrat and Republican, took $2.5 trillion in 20 years for us to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. How ridiculous!
Absolutely. And again, when you have two party, I want some. Those of you watching at home, I'll read the comments after the fact. Be sure to type in the comments the foreign policy differences between the Democrats and Republicans, and get back to me on this one.
Well, let's be fair, because I think the Democrats are going to declare April Anti-War Awareness Month.
I'm sure the Democrats are aware of the anti-war movement. I thank them for acknowledging that. Because as you know, a liberal is someone who's for civil rights, except for the movement happening right now, and against every war except the one we're funding right now.
Mm-hmm.
Golly. Yeah, the Democrats do not let their symbolic victories take away from the justice that they are robbing of you. Again, to quote Malcolm X, if you stab me with a 6-inch knife and you pull the knife out 3 inches, that's not progress. If you stab me with a knife and you pull the knife out and you leave it there, you know, the knife is out, but the wound is untreated. That's not progress. Progress is treating the wound that was caused. And we're never going to treat the wounds that were created by the Democrats and Republicans and the division sown by the culture war that again propagated by the Democrats and Republicans, propagated by the Republicans and perpetuated by the Democrats, allowed to have happen. In my personal view, we're never going to fix that if we keep voting them in, and we have to, you know. when we talk about compromise in this country, which is something that seems to have been lost in, the culture war,
Mhm.
uh, because part of the culture war was we will not compromise with the Democrats. That was a Republican stance. That anything Obama wants to do, even if it's something we agree with, we will not do it. I am old enough to remember the Tea Party taking over the Republicans, uh, and when you think of compromise, if the two people that hold power are unwilling to compromise with each other, you know, when you have, arbitration, you bring in a third party to be the compromise, to be the person to come up with a compromise. You have that opportunity as a voter to bring in a true sense of compromise, and not only compromise, because it's become a dirty word, compromise has, because compromise typically comes from the Democrats, who are willing to lessen their campaign promises and concede to the Republicans. The Republicans never compromise, but compromise typically means finding something that makes everybody happy. Unfortunately, everybody has not been happy with some of the most famous and awful compromises in U.S. history, where it's usually been kowtowing to the worst and most awful people in U.S. history. But we can have a system where the American people are truly listening to each other and talking to each other and sending people who they feel is representing their voice the best, and when we talk about third party unity, I think that's perhaps the most opportune time to do it. I'm not asking Green Party members to join the Pirate Party, nor am I asking vice versa. However, I will say to every Green Party supporter who's watching this video, I am not your enemy. In fact, I'm your friend. I want the best for you. I want the Green Party to be the Green Party as much as I want the Pirates to be the Pirates. But I want to reach across the aisle to you guys and say, I want to see your success as much as I want to see my own success. And I think every third party who is truly serious about defeating the duopoly and making this country more democratic and more representative of the people, I think that is what we have to do. We talk of, oftentimes you hear the phrase left unity, and left unity is important, but I think third party unity is as a broad front, just to say we are fighting the duopoly. It is time for us to join in hand and say we have to support one another. The question is, what about the libertarians, Mitch? And to that I say, I was once a member of the Libertarian Party during that small window when they weren't as crazy as seeming as,
Mhm.
others. Uh and to that I say I'm not inherently the enemy of any libertarian. I consider myself a bit of a libertarian socialist in my own right. But that to being said, I'm certainly not going to fight a libertarian trying to appear on the ballot. I'm certainly not going to tell a libertarian, don't you dare try, to defeat the Republicans or the Democrats. I may not agree with the libertarians on certain many issues, but I do agree that we need other choices. And if the voters of a certain region believe that the libertarian candidate is the most qualified to represent their views, who am I to take away the views of those people? And that is what it boils down to, is we should have people feeling the most represented by the people who feel they can represent them the best. And that may not be a Democrat, that may not be a Republican, and it will certainly come from a third party or an independent. Now, Pete, we are wrapping up. It is going to be that 45-minute mark very soon. Is there anything you want to leave off on?
Just want to say thank you, and let's do this thing. I mean, let's get all these parties together and go forward with a unified front and just decimate decimate the Republicans and Democrats and call them out for what they are, and let people know and learn about them. It's our job. It's our job to teach them how evil they are. That's how. Let's leave it with that. Let's leave it with the evil word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, on a lighter note, the one of the things I saw today was an old Onion article. I think it was from last year, maybe. but it said Pentagon warns China is developing love, the most powerful weapon. uh, which truly, to each and every one of you, I love you. I am not a man driven by hate. I'm a man driven by love of my countrymen, love of my people, and love of my neighbor, wherever my neighbor's from. I truly I want nothing but the best for the people who inhabit the land around me, and the people who have inhabited the land before me, and the people who will inhabit the land after me. I want nothing but the best for you, my fellow countrymen, my fellow people. Anyone who inhabits this landmass is my countrymen, my continental brethren, the people of the new world. God damn, I love you all. But folks, I've lost track of what I was getting at. Pete, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, thank you so much for watching. Pete will join us again on April 19th, the return of the Pirate National Committee meeting. We're going to be off for both Easters, so don't try to tune in. You won't find nothing. Folks, thank you so much. Vote Pirate, and victory is ours.
There you go.